So hello everyone, my name is Tarun and I'm an engineer at Dragonfly DB. So in today's talk, we'll see how to configure the authentication mechanisms in Dragonfly Operator, right? With Dragonfly, you get two authentication mechanisms, right? One is through password and the other is through client certificate through TLS. Both of these are supported with the operator, and now we'll see in this demo on how to use them. So first, let's start with the password-based authentication, right? Obviously, because it's a password, we'll use Kubernetes secrets to store the password. So first, let's store the password in a secret. So I've created a secret called the Dragonfly Auth with a key called the password and the value as Dragonfly. Now let's create a Dragonfly instance which uses this secret and this specific key in that secret. So if you see here, we are essentially trying to create a Dragonfly instance called the Dragonfly Auth with an authentication mechanism called the passwords from secret, and this we specify the secret name and the relevant key on that, which is password. So once we do, and we are asking for a couple of replicas. So once we do this, we should see two replicas being created, or two instances of Dragonfly Auth be created. Once both of them are ready, we'll see how it works. Now both of our instances are ready. So now let's try to connect to that instance, right? To see if the authentication method actually works. So now if we try to connect to Dragonfly, the auth instance with no password, we should essentially not be able to run commands and all of that. We should see a command line here. So we see one. But when we write info, we see that no authentication required. So we should pass authentication, right? So let's do that. Let's pass the authentication. Now we should see that the info command should work, which means you're authenticated. So this is the password-based authentication. Now let's exit that. Now let's look at the TLS-based authentication, right? Which is the client, which is verifying a client through a client certificate. So essentially, we specify the CA certificate of clients that we trust, and Dragonfly makes sure that the client has a certificate that has been signed by the CA that it trusts. So now let's do that. First, let's install a cert manager, right? Cert manager is a tool that essentially allows you to create and request certificates on a Kubernetes cluster. Once certificate, so let's see if the pods are working. Once these are all working, we'll request certificates, right? So first, we have to request multiple things here. First, we'll ask for an issuer for the server itself, right? Because we can't do client TLS without the server also has without the Dragonfly instance also doing TLS. So it's like MTLS where both of them have certificates, both the client and server, and they both each other verify that they trust the certificate by verifying that if it is generated from a specific CA. So now let's first create the server issuer, right? This issuer will use it for the TLS certificate of Dragonfly TLS itself. So now let's ask for a certificate for Dragonfly server. So if you see here, we are asking for a certificate on that issuer, and the certificate is called the Dragonfly sample, and this will be used by the Dragonfly instance itself. Before we do any of that, now let's also ask for a client issuer, right? We call the client CA issuer, and the important thing to note here is that it also has the usage mechanism called the client auth, because this will be used by the client itself. This is called the Dragonfly client CA. Now let's create a Dragonfly instance with the server TLS, right? If you see here, we are essentially asking for a Dragonfly sample instance with the authentication method called the client CS cert secret with a specific name and key. Here we pass the Dragonfly client CA, right? Because we are asking, we are giving it a client CA that we trust, a CA that we trust, that we expect the clients to use certificates that are generated from this. And also we also pass the server TLS, right? TLS secret ref, which is the Dragonfly sample that we have created before. Now once our instance is ready, the Dragonfly sample, both 0 and 1, we'll try authenticating without anything first, and that would not work, and then we'll use a Redis CLI client that has the certificate, and then we should see that the authentication working. Let's wait a bit more. So now we have the main, the master working. So let's try to run the commands on it, right? So here now let's try to talk to the Dragonfly sample default, which has the TLS based authentication mechanism. Now, if you run info, you see that the server isn't accepting the connection at all. It's closing the connection. This is because there is no client certificate to verify and accept the incoming connection. Now, now let's create a Redis CLI client that uses the certificate generated from the client CA that we initially created. So now I'm creating a kubectl run instance here. But if you see here, we are using TLS on the Redis CLI with the same Dragonfly sample. Here we are passing the CS cert of the. So there are multiple things here that we have to pass, right? First, we have to pass the client certificate and the client key. For that, we load the client CA volume into the etc TLS path, and then we pass them here. The TLS cert and the TLS key, and then we also need to trust the server itself, right? And the Redis CLI command has to trust the Dragonfly server itself. For that, we pass the Dragonfly sample as CS cert, and then we essentially load that into the CS cert file. So we are both the client and the server are verifying each other here. So now if we run this command, we should see that the connection should be accepted and command should be able to run. As you can see here, we have the client has been authenticated, and both the server and client are authenticated. And here we also get the benefit of encrypted communication, right? Because this is all through TLS, which means any man in the middle of attacks, all of that are not there at all. So this is nice. I think this is a very good security feature if you're an enterprise and looking for things. So as we say, we covered both the authentication mechanisms available in the Dragonfly operator today.